I'm going to try to identify, in my brief remarks today, 10 legal conundrums or oddities that we're constantly faced at the national office. The state and federal roundup of some of the laws and initiatives that are in play right now, Pot and Politics 2008, and then some news on the next NORML conference, the webpage, podcasts, and blogs. There are 10 conundrums we face all the time beyond the 830,000 plus arrests that happen every year in the United States. Obviously, you know as lawyers and the activists here that these cases run the gambit. But there are 10 areas of law that are sort of catching our attention, some of which you will be familiar with. All of them are troubling at their core. One is the denial of medical patients, notably medical marijuana patients, the ability to access transplant organs. Douglas Hyatt, who's speaking today, who I'm sure will allude to this, represented an individual, I say represented, because he has passed away, because he was not able to access a liver. And Doug, I think, will probably explain the absurdity of that case, and that is emblematic of what's happening all around the country. But the idea that a medical patient who's following their doctor's recommendation to use medical cannabis and then is denied access to a transplant of an organ, heart, lung, kidney, this is happening all the time and is very, very disturbing because there's no scientific reason why somebody should be denied an organ because they use cannabis, whether it's for medical purposes or not. Medical patients, notably the medical marijuana patients, are now being denied access to pain clinics and access to opioids around the United States, whether they're private clinics or the VA-run ones. This is coming up all the time where they test positive for THC and they no longer have access to opioids or other powerful narcotics. Increasingly difficult, the increasing difficulty in the United States to cross our borders with Canada and with Mexico, notably Canada. I mean, if you just don't go through a pro forma crossover at one of the major crosses, and you actually have to submit your name, many of us, just a simple Google search is going to keep you out of those countries, whether you've ever been arrested or not. Just the fact that you're involved in a marijuana law reform group, or that the internet can find that somehow ties you to the affectations of cannabis and counterculture, you're denied access into Canada.
Keith, you should have been that lucky 20 years ago.
That's right, he should have been that lucky. And of course now, people like himself and me, we can't accept lectures up to Toronto and McGill and other universities because it's not clear that we can actually get into the country. So this is very disturbing for intellectual, cultural exchanges, and business, of course. What's that?
You told me that before you put me on the board.
Looks like I'm going to be stuck in the Bay Area. Parents, notably mothers, are having their custodial rights terminated. And this has been going on for years. It's something that is increasing in time, and it's something that NORML, the ACLU, and a number of groups, mainly in New York, advocates for pregnant women, have been working on for years. And these trends just keep going upwards. Customs and immigration, non-border areas. In Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, you're now finding some of these TSA immigration searches hundreds of miles from the border, and many of them are frankly just ruse for drug checkpoints, for which are supposed to be illegal under a Supreme Court decision a few years ago, or at least they're supposed to be much more restricted than these absurd, no problem, so these absurd roadblocks that they're doing.
Keep it like a dungeon.
So we're finding a lot of these cases starting to come in mainly from New Mexico and Arizona. Now you're hearing a lot of non-citizens who get arrested, of course, in these crackdowns of illegal immigration, and they get before a court and they're not allowed to even make motions. You have judges now saying, well, this is an illegal immigrant. They don't have any civil liberties. They can't put forward any constitutional arguments. This too is happening more and more in the epoch that we're living in. We have a continuing wave of individuals being arrested on marijuana charges or for DUID charges that are asserting religious defenses. And of course, this has always been kind of a interesting gray area in marijuana laws, the idea that you could assert a religious defense. Well, of course, Indians have done it successfully for peyote. We have a small sect of sort of elite individuals who have done it under ayahuasca. But from that Supreme Court decision a few years ago, it was pretty clear from the majority decision that marijuana would, in their view, never qualify to be a drug that would be used as a religious exemption. But I think most of us feel like that is something that should be litigated to the tilt. And one of the things we found vexing is, and I'll name it by brand name, is the THC ministry in Hawaii, who sells $250 religious defense kits. So in the last 2 months, I've had 5 or 6 people around the country get arrested and contact NORML who are asserting their religious defense based on their $250 purchase of a kit from Hawaii. So despite those not being necessarily a proper way to get to court, we still should litigate these matters. We have many of these cases. We also have, particularly in places like California, the state colleges and universities are denying students access to school, to be in their dorms, to be in the fraternities, to be on the school property with their medical cannabis. They can be on campus with their OxyContin, with their methadone, with their Percocet, but they can't be on campus with their cannabis. So obviously we think we're going to be litigating that probably in California. Humboldt State University likely will be our test case. I know. And of course there's high-tech interdiction and devices. This of course pushes the limit of the law all the time. And ion scanners, full body scans, gamma busters, sniffing devices. The DEA is contracted with a couple of major genetic research companies to try to implant at the source. So if they catch somebody growing cannabis, they want to sort of insert DNA tags onto that cannabis, and they will follow it from the point of production